right, so what hormone keeps the corpus luteum functioning? HCG. HCG. All right? And HCG is secreted by what? What's HCG secreted by? What has to form? The placenta. Okay, good. All right. What's the name of the structure on the sperm cell that contains enzymes to eat through to get to the egg? Acrosome. And what's the layer of protective cells around the egg that it has to eat through? Zona pellucida. All right. Okay, so it eats through. It binds. What does it bind to on the egg cell? Binds to receptors. Okay, somebody explain to me fast block. Aaron.
Receptors change.
Now, what kind of changes? Two changes.
Negative to positive.
Okay, polarity changes from negative to positive, but actually that happens kind of as a result of the first change. Molecular changes. There's actually molecular changes that take place. Okay? It's like in all of the receptors, molecular changes take place. It's like changing the locks on a door that changes from negative to positive. Somebody explain to me slow block.
The zona pellucida hardens?
Well, zona pellucida hydrates. Okay? It hydrates, and like pasta or rice, it expands, and then it hardens. The zona pellucida. It's like a force field. All right? And then what happens later after that?
Nuclear fusion.
Nuclear fusion. Okay, so the combining of the eggs and sperms chromosomes, all right, and the nuclei to become one. Now, there's other things that happen in that time period that we're not going to focus on, but all right. So you have fertilization, right? Okay. How long before the first mitotic division? 18 to 36 hours. Oh, you big cheater. 18 to 36 hours. Okay. About what day does implantation take place? Day 7. Okay. Now, I said that day 3 or 4 is when the blastocyst forms. That's what it is in one textbook. Another textbook, it says day 4 or 5. So somewhere between day 3 and day 5, a blastocyst forms. There's another term that your book talks about that once it becomes 12 cells or more, it becomes a morula. And then it becomes a blastocyst. I don't know if it doesn't say if it's technically still a morula or what, but anyway, there's a lot of terminology there that we're not even going to focus on. All right? Okay, so the first 2 weeks developmentally is called what period? Germinal period. Germinal period. Okay, developmentally. All right, first 2 weeks developmentally. When I mean developmentally, I'm talking about developmental age. That's germinal period. What 3 cell layers are forming during this time? Endoderm, ectoderm, mesoderm. Those are the 3 germ layers. Okay, 2 weeks.
Are you saying germ layers or derm layers?
Okay, I'm saying germ layers, but the layers are called mesoderm, ectoderm. Okay, you know, why do they change the letters on you like that? I'm not sure. Okay, now, week 2 to week 8, what period is that? Embryonic. What is going on to describe the embryonic period? No, not yet. That's vague. Cell growth. Okay. All organs and systems are coming into existence. Okay? So by the time you get to the end of the embryonic period and the beginning of what's the next one? Fetal period. Okay? So the beginning of fetal period is marked by bone ossification, and now all organs and systems are now present. Okay? All right? And that's 8 weeks to birth. How many weeks is birth developmentally? Or due date? Let's say full term.
Depends on
developmentally.
40 weeks?
38 weeks. 38 weeks developmentally. Developmental age. Okay? All right. And okay, somebody give me. Well, yes.
When does bone ossification take place?
It takes place at the beginning of the fetal period. That's one of the things that marks the beginning of the fetal period, transitioning from can't even think, from embryonic to fetal period. Okay. Okay. Somebody tell me 3 differences between clinical and developmental age. Jenny, give me one. Okay, which one's more accurate? Developmental is more accurate. Okay, means clinical is less accurate. All right, but what is it about clinical? It's more precise because you pinpoint the day. All right, which one's longer? Clinical is longer because it begins at the first day of a woman's last menstrual cycle. Okay, all right, and then 2 weeks later she has ovulation. So developmental is 2 weeks shorter. Okay, between day 3 and 5, you have blastocyst forms. This is a illustration of blastocyst. This outer part is called the trophoblast. That's what's going to form into the placenta and the umbilical cord. And then you have this inner cell mass from which you're going to get the embryonic disc, and that's where you get your mesoderm, endoderm, and ectoderm. Okay, so it's not just like only the endoderm, ectoderm, mesoderm form. Okay, you have other cells in there too, but it's from endoderm, ectoderm, mesoderm where you're going to get all of your structures. Okay, now about day 21, 3 weeks after fertilization. Okay, the woman in her mind, imagine this, the woman in her mind thinks she's a week late, right? She's a week late from starting her menstrual cycle. She still may not know for sure she's pregnant. You start to have a heartbeat, okay? Now, I've seen in textbooks where it says 18 to 21 days. In this textbook, it says 21 to 24 days. So a lot of it, I guess, depends. So we're going to just say approximately day 21, you're going to have the first heartbeat. Now, from the ectoderm and endoderm, you're going to get the mesoderm. And again, every major structure is going to come from those 3 germ layers. All right? And we're going to talk about a few things that do come from those 3 germ layers. So, endoderm. What are some things I want you to know that comes from the endoderm? All right? Endoderm, you get most of your glands. And when I mean most of your glands, I'm talking about your thymus gland, your thyroid, of course, parathyroid, your tonsils. So many of your glands, not all the glands, but many of your glands come from the endoderm, including the anterior pituitary. You also get the majority of your lungs and your GI tract from the endoderm. I won't say all of it because it's not all of it. It's most of it. It's actually the lining of it. But we're just going to say the majority of your digestive tract and your lungs. Okay? All right, so what about the ectoderm? The ectoderm, you're going to get the majority of your skin. Okay? But you're also going to get most of your brain and your spinal cord. So your brain and spinal cord, majority of it comes from the same layer of cells that you get in the majority of your skin. Okay. Also from the ectoderm, you're going to get your posterior pituitary. And does anybody remember the difference between the anterior and posterior pituitary and how they're controlled or what they're made up of? Does anybody remember? They do secrete different hormones, and both of them are controlled by the hypothalamus. But does anybody remember how they're controlled by the hypothalamus? Okay. All right. The posterior pituitary is controlled by nerve impulses from the hypothalamus, making the posterior pituitary more nerve tissue-like, whereas the anterior pituitary is controlled by hormones that come through the bloodstream. It's more epithelial tissue. More glandular, like the thymus and the tonsils. Its structure is different. Okay, that's why the posterior pituitary comes from a completely different source. In fact, when they come together, they actually merge together as they're growing. It merges to form the pituitary gland. So it's like coming from two different places and they merge together. You're also going to get, from the ectoderm, you're going to get facial muscles and bones in your head. All right? Which is kind of weird, I know. But, let me take that back. Facial bones, and muscles in the head. My bad. Facial bones and muscles in the head. All right, from the mesoderm, you're going to get your what we're talking about. Person's gonads, their testes or their ovaries, come from the mesoderm. The rest of bones and muscles come from the mesoderm. Your kidneys come from the mesoderm. And the cardiovascular system. All right, so cardiovascular system, kidneys, your gonads, and the rest of the muscles in your bones. Now, here's how things are so weird, and you don't have to know this because this is kind of how it gets weird. The epidermis of your skin technically comes from the ectoderm, but the dermis, the underlying, comes from actually from the mesoderm. So that's how it's kind of different. You can't just say, well, does this come from this? And actually, it's usually a combination of things. That's why I'm kind of generalizing with all of this. All right? Okay. All right. Heart and cardiovascular development. Like I said, the heart begins to beat at 21 days. This says 20 days after fertilization. All right. Right before it starts to beat, it actually consists of two parallel tubes. Blood's going through it, but it's not really doing anything yet. And this says day 22, so it just depends on what textbook you're looking at too. You see it right here. You see how it begins to close up. The chambers begin to form. All right. Here's the thing that's cool though. Think about your heart. Remember we talked about your heart, and the right side receives and pumps what type of blood? Deoxygenated. Left side pumps oxygenated, right? Why? Why does it pump oxygenated? It just came from what? The lungs, right? Think about this. Fetal heart, not so. Where's the oxygen coming from? The mother. So in the mother, I'm going to skip ahead for a second. In the mother, all right, here it comes to the umbilical cord, right? And so as it comes up, the umbilical vein, it's called a vein because it's going toward the heart, but this blood is actually oxygenated. And so it gets here, and it goes to the heart, right side of the heart. The right side of the heart is actually receiving oxygenated blood in a fetus. And then it pumps oxygenated blood to the lungs. Why does it pump oxygenated blood to the lungs? Well, it's got to have a pathway. But what's the purpose of the lungs at this point? Nothing. They're collapsed. So instead of blood going to the lungs to get oxygen, blood is going to the lungs to deliver oxygen. Because they're made up of cells, right? They got to have oxygen. How are they going to get oxygen? Well, it's like everything else. It's got to come from the lung, right? So blood is being pumped to the lungs to deliver oxygen. But here's the thing. Not all the blood is pumped to the lungs from the right atrium. There's two little things that exist in the heart that helps a lot of the blood to bypass the lungs. In your heart, you want every bit of the blood going to the lungs, right? To get as maximized amount of oxygen you're getting, right? Okay. But in a fetal heart, okay, you have oxygenated blood coming to the right side and oxygenated blood going to the lungs. But you don't need all that blood going to the lungs. Okay? So there's two structures that allows a lot of the blood to bypass the lungs. Okay? One's called the foramen ovale. Where have we heard the foramen ovale before?
In the skull.
In the skull, right? Well, just like there's a Coronoid there's like 2 coronoid processes, 3 styloid two styloid process, all kind of stuff. Here's another foramen ovale. Okay, this is a hole that exists between the right and left side of the heart. Okay, the right and left side of the heart. So as blood comes to the right atrium, some of it spills over from the right atrium to the left atrium, and then the left ventricle, and then out to the body. That's going to help get more oxygen to other parts of the body, rather than all the blood going to the lungs. You don't want all the blood going to the lungs. You just want a little bit of blood going to the lungs, enough to sustain it and provide oxygen for it. Yes?
Is that why pregnant women are out of breath so easily?
Well, they're out of breath because they're breathing for 2.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not like 2 grown adults, but they are. They're breathing for 2. 1, they're carrying more weight. Okay? So they're having to do the same amount of work with more weight on them. Right? So it puts pressure on their back and all this other kind of stuff. But yeah, they're out of breath because they had to get more oxygen, not just to their body, but to the fetus. And if you want to think about it this way, this is a horrible way to think about it, because I don't think of it this way, but in reality, it's true. A fetus is like a parasite because it is living off another organism, just like parasites do. And when you eat, food is going to go to the fetus, even before it goes to the mother. Oxygen that you breathe in is going to go to that fetus, even before it goes to everything in the mother. It's kind of wild, but that's true. Okay. All right. So you have the foramen ovale, and again, these are just cardiac differences between a fetus and somebody that's born, anywhere from infant up. All right. So there's a foramen ovale. That's the first structure that allows blood to bypass the lungs. The second thing is this structure called the Ductus Arteriosus. Ductus Arteriosus. Don't you love these Latin terms? Any Latin people in here? Okay.
I took it for like 4 years.
Alright. Ductus Arteriosus. Alright, now, the Ductus Arteriosus ends up becoming a ligament later on, but it is a canal that connects the pulmonary trunk. Remember, where does the pulmonary trunk come from? Comes from the right atrium, okay, pulmonary trunk, and then delivers blood to the lungs. All right. Well, the pulmonary trunk has this small blood vessel that connects to the aorta. Remember, the aorta pumps blood where? Directs blood where? The rest of the body. Okay. So, watch this. So, oxygenated blood comes in a fetus. In a fetus, oxygenated blood comes in the right atrium. Some of it spills on into the left atrium. Some goes to a lot of it goes to the right ventricle, then up to the pulmonary trunk. And the pulmonary trunk, there's still right and left pulmonary veins. Pulmonary arteries. Okay? But some of it's going to go in that ductus arteriosus on into the aorta. Again, that's going to help get oxygenated blood to other parts of the fetal's body. Okay? Here's the other difference. Pressure. Blood pressure. In our heart, where's the blood pressure higher? Right or left side? Left side, because it has to pump blood where compared to the right side? It has to pump blood to the entire body. Okay? It has to pump blood to the entire body, where our right side of the heart only has to pump blood to the lungs. But think about this. In a fetus's heart, the right side is pumping blood to the lungs, but it's also helping distribute blood to the rest of the body by getting it directly either into the left atrium or directly into the aorta. So pressure is higher on the right side of the heart in a fetus. Okay? Is that not cool to anybody? Oh, that's what we get. We'll get to that later. That's really cool. All this stuff happens. As soon as the baby's born, everything starts changing. It metamorphosizes in a minute.
Football.
Yes.
So after the baby's born and the umbilical cord is cut, what happens to umbilical vein?
Okay, I'll tell you that. You're getting ahead of me, but it actually just becomes a ligament.
Oh.
It just becomes a ligament. Yeah. And the ductus arteriosus, everything closes. Right? I told you Rachel's story, right? I made up, cried in front of you and all that kind of stuff. She was in neonatal unit for a week. It wasn't because she was too small, because she wasn't. She was plenty big enough. But the foramen ovale hadn't closed yet. And they had to give her excess oxygen, and they had to wait for the foramen ovale to close. And it took about a week for that. When a baby's typically born, it'll close like that. But her heart hadn't developed enough, and her lungs, of course, wasn't developed. So they had to wait for that to finish developing. Your lungs are the absolute last thing to develop, completely. Why? You don't need them. You don't need them. It's the only organ, really, that you do not use until you're born. Everything else you're using inside the womb, but you're not using your lungs. So it's the last thing to develop. Okay. All right. Okay. 10 minutes. All right. Okay, fetal growth. This is the last thing we're going to cover. Now, to me, I think this is cool. All right, this is really, really cool. All right. Now, what you're looking at is different trimesters. All right, so you're looking at around 13 weeks or so, 13 weeks or so, 13 weeks or so. Let's take that back. 38 weeks. So you're looking at almost 13 weeks, almost 13 weeks, almost 13 weeks. So you're talking about developmental age. Okay? All right. I want you to know, because this will be a great compare and contrast question. I want you to know the relative levels of estrogen, progesterone, and HCG, and their source in each trimester. Okay? All right. You look at it. First trimester. Remember what has to continue to function? No, corpus luteum. And it continues to function because of the placenta. So look up here. Here's the placenta here. No, I'm sorry. That's corpus luteum here. Here's the placenta here. See how much HCG it's secreting. The placenta is secreting a lot of HCG in the first trimester. That's when HCG maxes out, is in the first trimester. The corpus luteum is secreting all of the progesterone and estrogen. Progesterone at higher levels than estrogen. Okay? Estrogen is not extremely high. It's high enough to prevent you from starting your period. Because if you start your period, these things go way down. Okay? All right, so HCG is coming from the placenta, progesterone, estrogen from the corpus luteum. Moderate levels of both. All right, with progesterone being probably twice as high as estrogen. Still not nearly as high as HCG. But watch. In the second trimester, when everything's developing more, corpus luteum becomes less important. So it starts secreting less progesterone and estrogen. And now all of a sudden the placenta begins taking over secreting progesterone and estrogen. So the progesterone and estrogen levels, they're kind of rising slowly but steady. But most of that rise is due to the placenta, not the corpus luteum. Y'all with me? Y'all with me on this? Okay. Now, because the placenta is taking over secreting progesterone and estrogen, what happens to HCG levels? They start to decline because it's not needed as much. Make sense? By the time you get to the third trimester, the corpus luteum is pretty much completely diminished. You don't need it anymore. You only needed it in the beginning to make sure that you prevented starting your period. However, by the time it gets to the third trimester, the placenta has completely taken over secreting progesterone and estrogen. And HCG is still secreted a little bit in a little bit of amounts, but the placenta is taking over secreting progesterone and estrogen. Notice which one's higher all throughout pregnancy, progesterone or estrogen? Progesterone. So progesterone and estrogen are really going to really increase, but you see how much ground estrogen has gained. What do you think is happening right here when estrogen takes over progesterone? Birth. Okay? So during labor, we'll talk about labor during block day. During labor, it switches. During labor, it switches. Right? Progesterone will start to go down, estrogen will start really going up. Okay? So I will want you to know relative levels. And when I mean relative, I'm talking about really high, moderates. Like here, the second trimester, estrogen, progesterone are slowly but steadily increasing. Third trimester, they really rise more rapidly. Okay, but you also need to know that it's no. We got 5 minutes. You also need to know that the placenta begins taking over the role of secreting progesterone and estrogen beginning in the second trimester. By the third trimester, it completely takes over the role of secreting progesterone and estrogen. Okay? One thing to really look at, you can do it this way. You could look at it like you could do like first, second, third trimester, and then you could either do one of two things on the side. You could either do it from like the corpus luteum and placenta's point of view, you know, what they're secreting and when, or you can divide it up into threes and do it from HCG, progesterone, and estrogen point of view. Does that make sense? And say what's happening to them, and but you do need to talk about the sources too. So again, relative levels of these hormones in each trimester, and also the source of these hormones in each trimester. Okay?